If you are looking to get a new 3D printer in 2026, it can seem really overwhelming with the amount of information and speed at which this industry is growing. And that's exactly why I would like to give you my honest review on the new Creator 5 from Flashforge that they sent me. And this printer has a lot of the new features on the market, so this video should help you see if that's something for you. Because it definitely surprised me in many ways, so let's get into it. Well, one of the most important parts is the price, and it really surprised me when I found out that it costs just $699 compared, for example, to some of the competition like Snapmaker U1, which cost $899, which made me question if this price decrease will show in the quality. Because if not, then I think this price will allow even people who are just starting out to get the full experience of a 3D printer for an acceptable price. To find out, let's start unboxing and assembling the 3D printer, which is also quite an important part of the whole process, because if you get stuck even before your first print, usually the experience isn't that good. But I cannot really say that over here, because right after opening the box and pulling the printer out of it on my table, and then removing the plastic protection, the printer was basically already assembled. Then, once you start removing the foams inside one by one, you'll realize that inside of it is the multi-nozzle system. Then a few parts that you have to mount yourself, for example the display, which you just push into place and then secure it with screws that were included. Then you can start putting these nozzle blockers inside of the printer, which helps prevent extrusion when the nozzle isn't being used and is waiting for its exchange. Then we can already start putting in the multi-nozzle system, which you just need to make sure to have it aligned and then just simply press it into place. And then again, as well as with the display, you just secure it into place with 2 screws. Now the next step is really important to get it right, because I nearly got it wrong and it would ruin the whole printer setup. Because as you can see, there are 2 holes that you insert into the pins that are on the printer, but you need to make sure that the PTFE tube and the cable are perfectly aligned, that they aren't twisted together, because that could go wrong when it's printing. Also, all of this was very well documented in the quick start guide, so if you are going on your own, you don't need to worry. And if you ever get lost, you can always look into it. Then to finish the nozzle setup, you just plug in this cable into the main head and screw it in place, again with 2 screws. Now there are 3 screws securing the bed from moving, so you need to unscrew them. 2 on the left and 1 on the right side. They are pretty easy to find, so I think you can do it. So just make sure to pull all of them out, because otherwise the printer won't work. Now before we start mounting the spool holders, there is one very important step that we need to take that it took me a bit longer to figure out. Because the hole you're supposed to screw it in is actually hidden behind this sticker, so you just need to remove them before you start putting them in. But after that, it's pretty easy to assemble. You just put in the spool holder and secure it with a screw. One important thing to keep in mind is that you should always make the spool holder face out of the printer, not inside, because then the spools have actually enough space to fit in there. Then of course the best part about the setup is removing the protective foil from the display. And then once that is done, we can actually plug in the printer. Then once it starts loading up, you just need to go through some of the basic settings like language or Wi-Fi, and then once that is done, you can actually even connect it with your phone by scanning the QR code on the screen. Then you can start the proper calibration, but I had to first move it to a proper place so that it wouldn't be standing on this wobbly table. If we don't include this calibration, the whole setup took just about 15 minutes, which is amazing, it's fast, and that's even with me trying to film the whole thing. Now once you start loading the filament in there, you will notice that it still needs to purge the old filament out, and what it does is it goes into the bag and over there it starts extruding the filament. Which is kind of weird, because there is not really any proper place for it to extrude into. Thankfully, Flashforge themselves published a solution where they provide a bin that you can just print and assemble it into the bag. So even though this seemed like a weird issue at first, I really appreciate Flashforge for solving it. Now the most important part is the multi-nozzle system, because it's not just that you can use for colors, you can do that even with other printers that have, for example, AMS. But the point that we have 4 filaments constantly prepared to print, and the waste is basically 0 besides the small purge tower. And even more, that it can be 500% faster for any multicolor print. because you never need to clean the nozzle. There are just 4 nozzles that are constantly prepared to print with different plastics and different colors. And so the first thing that I wanted to try that was always hard to print and would just take too much time was to use a different support interference, because if you don't know, if you use something like PLA and then you use PETG for the support interference, not only will it remove the most annoying parts about supports, which is when they stay there even though they shouldn't, it also leaves a perfect surface finish after the supports, which as we all know is always a problem with supports. So I made a very simple test print where I printed it from PLA and used support interference as PETG. It was really cool to look at how the nozzles are switching. And then after every single switch, it just needs to lay a bit of the filament down on the purge tower so that it prevents things like stringing. And as promised, it separated perfectly and it left a perfect surface finish. Which to me is amazing, because from now on I can use this with every single model where I need to use supports, and it won't take hours but minutes instead. And the next thing that I want to test is to use as many colors as I can and see how much time and filament it actually saves. So I decided to go with this very cute frog that I found on the internet. The file will be in the description. And I loaded 4 of my most fun colors into the printer. And so I loaded it inside of my slicers. Over here is for the Creator 5 using 4 nozzles, and over here is using just a single nozzle having to flush the filament. And once you look at the numbers, it's actually insane, because over here, as you can see, the frog has about just 30 grams of filament, just 30 grams. But the flushed filament, which is basically just waste and something that goes completely out, is not only 140 grams completely flushed, but even the tower takes 30 grams. So in total, it's 200 grams of filament, while the frog is only 30. And so the whole cost comes to $4. And I'm not even talking about the printing time, because the printing would take nearly 16 hours. And so when we compare it over here, as you can see, the printing would take just about 3 hours, the frog still takes 30 grams of filament, the tower still takes 30, so there's nothing being flushed, and so it costs just $1. And the crazy thing about it is that this is just a small frog that would take otherwise 16 hours, but this way it takes just 3 and doesn't waste any filament besides the purge tower. And so just for this small frog, if we put it into percentages, it's 80% faster, it has 0 filament exchanges, it uses 70% less filament, it has 0 flushed waste, and it costs 4 times less. And so when we are talking about multicolor printing, I believe that this system is a must for any printer in the future. And the Creator 5 provides exactly that at a very decent price. To summarize it, I think the Creator 5 comes at a really good price for what it's offering. The assembly is really easy, so that even a beginner who is just starting out will be able to do it, and it took just about 15 minutes for me, even with the recordings. It enables you to use 4 different filaments and then pair with the device to your phone, but when you load a new filament, it will extrude the old one over here in the back, which would get really annoying. So I'm thankful that Flashforge themselves provided a bin like this that you can print, that you just hang in there like this in the back, and it solves the issue. Then it was able to print from different materials, delivering this smooth surface finish on the support interference thanks to using PLA and PETG. And the whole process took a lot shorter time because of the nozzle switching. And it basically saves you from wasting filament on multicolor printing. And so if you are planning to do multicolor prints with a new 3D printer, I would definitely recommend buying one that has the nozzle system and not the ones using just a single nozzle. And of course, as the experience will go by, I will probably find things that could use improvements, but as well I will find things that are even more amazing about the printer and the nozzle switching system. But right now, if I would be starting over not having a large budget, the Creator 5 would be something that I would definitely go for. Thanks again for Flashforge for sending me one for a review, and I hope that this video was able to give you an overview of the features that the Creator 5 has.